based on the fundamental concept you've been discussing through the context of this conference, that success at reaching real scale, at getting beyond the pilot projects and small examples of wonderful, heartwarming philanthropy, requires engaging the business element that you represent. And it requires bringing businesses and entrepreneurs, development institutions and governments, philanthropists and scientists, all to the same task. For years, USAID has focused on engaging private enterprise in our central mission. And that is the mission to eliminate extreme poverty and suffering from the farthest corners of the globe. We've formed over 1,600 partnerships with over 3,000 private sector partners, most of whom have been small-scale, local private sector partners that often are the engines of growth and development in their communities. As a result of these strategic interactions, we're now helping to link 10,000 smallholder chickpea farmers, including this one, in Ethiopia, to PepsiCo's East African supply chain. By engaging in this kind of a partnership, they will actually be producing a chickpea-based food product that will work in commercial markets, be sold as hummus in their commercial markets in the region, but will also be fortified and packaged in special, long-lasting packets that can target children and women for distribution by the World Food Program in the very region that so many of us know has become a chronic story of famine, hunger, and extreme malnutrition, especially for kids. Those kinds of local solutions are the kinds of solutions that can break free of the challenges we face today and create the kind of impact at scale we all aspire to bring about. Last year, as you know, a devastating drought in East Africa led to about 12 million people being acutely food insecure. And for the first time in a number of years, we actually had a real famine on our hands. And of course, a famine is a measure not of food access, but of a rate of child death on a daily basis that is so acute and so high that we label it a famine. Now, in this context, the famine was caused by conflict and drought superimposed on each other. But it was also caused by the fact that small-scale farmers, who were the most vulnerable populations in that area, whether they were in very arid communities and relied on livestock or otherwise, were precisely the people who were hit the hardest. And one shining example kept hundreds of families from requiring urgent assistance in that context. In this photograph, you see small-scale farmers in southern Ethiopia and northern Kenya who were the part of a pilot program with Swiss Re. And they were actually getting climate-indexed weather insurance payments through the drought because Swiss Re could calculate that, in fact, through this pilot project, that their insurance conditions had been triggered. And those payments kept their communities afloat through the cycle of drought and kept them in their communities away from the camps where people had to go when they needed urgent assistance. Those kinds of partnerships can make a tremendous difference and over time can position a company like Swiss Re to be providing basic insurance products to hundreds of thousands of new customers all around the world. As a result of these types of engagements, we have been able to create change at scale. Our Development Credit Authority, which is designed to use loan guarantees to unlock local sources of capital, has approved 38 new partial credit guarantees just last year, mobilizing a record $700 million for small-scale entrepreneurs around the world. It costs the American taxpayer $1 for every $22 that's leveraged using this kind of a mechanism. That's smart foreign aid, and it's smart foreign aid that's generating important results. In this case, in the past year, those results reached more than 1 million people, as more than 140,000 small businesses benefited from loans and investments enabled by USAID's partnership with the private sector. By engaging the private sector in a win-win partnership, we believe we can sustain and expand these results long after foreign aid and assistance goes away. Because as President Obama has said repeatedly, the purpose of our aid is to create the conditions where it is no longer needed. We actually aspire, unlike most, I think, federal agencies, to put ourselves out of business over time. Today, as you all have this important meeting, 870 million people will go to bed hungry. 1.2 billion people will be trapped in extreme poverty. Today, 19,000 children under the age of 5 will die, and the great majority of them will die of incredibly simple diseases that are cheaply and easily prevented. Today, as a new drought rages across Western Africa, we know that 19 million people there suffer now from acute food insecurity, hunger, and we know that the average age of marriage for girls is 14 and going down in Niger, as young girls in families that are impoverished are literally being sold into marriage or slavery so that families can get by and have fewer mouths to feed. The drive to eliminate extreme poverty must be shared, in particular by local leaders and governments, if it is to be successful. There's perhaps no better illustration of this in our portfolio of work than the new Alliance for Food Security and Nutrition that President Obama unveiled last May at the Camp David G8 summit. We recognize, as we pursued the task of ending hunger through effective agricultural development, that despite all the progress that's been made and all the expanded investment going into sub-Saharan Africa in particular, almost none of that was driven into the private sector in production in agriculture or processing in agriculture over the last decade. The numbers were very, very meager. And when we reached out to global and local firms and asked why, the answers were pretty consistent. Fear of corruption, ineffective and unsteady policy environments, and critically, a lack of access to donor programs and partners who knew the context and who could mitigate those risks. And at the same time, we followed up aggressively with the countries themselves to ensure that they're implementing the tough policy commitments they made at the G8. And we're proud to say that across the board, they are making that progress. We're proud to announce today a new partnership with DevEx called DevEx Impact that will facilitate the expansion of these types of problem-solving arrangements and public-private partnerships. Together, we will combine the world's largest development network, DevEx's 500,000 professionals, with USAID's on-the-ground capacity in more than 80 missions around the world, to engage the private sector on large-scale efforts to eradicate and eliminate poverty and suffering.